All right, welcome back to another Shifting Schools podcast. Excited that both Tricia and I are here together for this one. Tricia, we had an amazing author on today. Do you want us to tell us a little bit more about Pepper?
Yeah, we try to bring you books that belong on those professional development library shelves. And this one is a parent perspective that I think isn't one that necessarily we get the time for. So Pepper Stetler's book is called A Measure of Intelligence, One Mother's Reckoning with the IQ Test. And it's, again, like a blend of family memoir, lots and lots of research. And it's an incredible book. I really enjoyed this. I tore through it in about 2 days. So let me tell you more about the author. Pepper Stetler is a writer that you may have come across in the New York Times or Slate or The Atlantic or the Wall Street Journal. She also happens to be a professor of art history at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. You'll be able to learn more about her at pepperstetler.com, and you'll be able to check out the book by heading over to the show notes. Jeff, anything that really stuck out to you from today's conversation? I know it's hard to pick just one thing, so sorry for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think I have not reflected much talking with Pepper today. I haven't reflected on this idea on how something like the IQ test has made its way into and how much value we put on it at all levels of education and society at large, right? When somebody says, oh, you're smart or you have a high IQ, what does that actually mean? And is it something that's worth valuing? And as we get into in today's podcast, what does that really mean, especially as we start talking about the idea of AI and what generative AI is doing? What do we mean when we say human intellect? And I think it's a kind of a good conversation around just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, this conversation definitely left me feeling inspired to think more expansively about how we define human intelligence, especially for young learners in our community. So folks, before we dig into this week's episode, we've got a quick word from our show sponsor.
Shifting Schools is excited to be sponsored by newlight.io. Their platform is designed to simplify MTSS frameworks for personalized student support. Built by leading experts, New Light focuses on getting educators the answers they need fast. Which students need which levels of support? With simple data collection and insightful analytics powered by AI, New Light's platform provides actionable solutions to support your students effectively. Try it for free at newlight.io. That's NEULIGHT.io. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. Looking for a place to connect with fellow educators, share ideas, and grow together? Well, welcome to Camp Shifting Schools. It's the free, vibrant community where educators like you can learn, network, and collaborate. With the fall of X, formerly Twitter, finding a trusted space is more important than ever. Join Tricia and I for exclusive courses, webinars, and Ask Me Anything sessions designed just for educators like you. Let's build a better future for education together. Visit camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the camp community today.
And with that, welcome to the show, Pepper Stetler. Pepper, we're really excited to be speaking with you about your new book. Listeners, the title of it is A Measure of Intelligence, One Mother's Reckoning with the IQ Test. It's a blend of family memoir, research, history, and one that, of course, is super relevant for our audience. It really looks at what it means to educate in an inclusive way. So just to kick that off, I wanted to quote actually from the book. This is on page 212. You wrote, quote, "I searched for more complex narratives that respected Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities as part of the human condition. They were hard to find," end quote. So can we start with you talking about how your experience within and beyond the process of writing this book has left you thinking about what it means to actually have an inclusive school?
Yeah, thank you, Tricia. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really delighted to be here. And yes, so that quote comes from the end of the book. And just to give it a little context, like I'm thinking about when I was starting to write this book, I think as all writers do, kind of searches for models of how the particular narrative that they want to share might look. And I seemed to find two different models for talking about Down syndrome. One was a kind of medical model that emphasized the medical differences of people with Down syndrome and really emphasized a sense of deficiency there, like a difference from normal, emphasized what could go wrong in the medical profile of a person with Down syndrome, and certainly emphasized the intellectual differences of a person with Down syndrome. So that was one model that for me as a mother of my daughter, Louisa, who has Down syndrome, was pretty bleak to me. And then the other model I found was one that was coming from parents a lot, and I think was responding to that medical model and really reacting to it and trying to argue for kids with Down syndrome and people with Down syndrome as being these little angels from heaven, right? Thinking of them as just these super special people that are here on the planet to make us happier. And when I read things like that, I didn't like that either. That was also pretty unsatisfying to me. And I just felt like both of those narratives make it very easy to segregate people with intellectual disabilities and people with Down syndrome specifically from the experience of humanity, and inclusive education and education among their peers as being one of those experiences that I think people with intellectual disabilities have a right to. So I was searching to create a kind of narrative that asserts that Down syndrome and people with intellectual disabilities are simply part of the larger variety of humanity, that there's a part of them that is human in the way that these other narratives didn't really assert. And along with that comes all of the complexities and challenges of inclusive education. But I think inclusive education for all people is a human right and something that they deserve.
And I know in the book you also reference this idea that when it comes to representation, as you've been talking about, there's very few books that are written from the perspective of someone with Down syndrome. And I'm just thinking about how important that is for teachers also to be thinking about our professional development libraries. There's actually a hashtag on social media that I see quite often. I'm happy to see quite often. It's hashtag actually autistic. And the rise of the use of that hashtag are people chiming in and saying, instead of being talked about, let me tell you a little bit about your experience. And so I really appreciate the nuance and the number of highly personal anecdotes that you share in this book. And I'm sure that wasn't easy for you, but I think it's really necessary for people to be connecting with that story piece.
Yeah, thank you. We should also thank Louisa as well, for my daughter, for letting me share them with the book. In the book, I had a very kind of collaborative spirit about it, in the sense that I wanted to talk to her. I talked to her about the pieces that I wanted to include. And that was something that was always in the back of my head, that I didn't want to write Louisa's experience. I wanted to write from my experience as her mother and not assume that I'm speaking for her. But then I'm also, as a mother, constantly trying to find opportunities for her to have a chance to reflect on her identity in all of its facets and forms of this. There's a story I talk about at the very end of the book, where Louisa is given this opportunity by a teacher in 6th grade on a kind of unit they're doing about identity to make a presentation and talk to her class about Down syndrome. And I wasn't there for the presentation because it was during school. I got some pictures and all, but it seemed like just a really wonderful moment for me where my daughter got a chance to assert her belonging in this space. And that was, I think, deeply meaningful for her and meaningful for me as well.
And I think there's so much you talk about in the book. And one of the parts that you really hit home on is that we're really at this inflection point of really talking about human intelligence and what does that mean and how we talk about human intelligence today. Can you maybe talk about what it might mean to make a paradigm shift, to say, for lack of a better word, around this idea and some of the things we can think about as educators when we think about this idea of human intelligence?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, to some degree, you're probably alluding to the inflection of AI intelligence, right? And that's putting a lot of pressure on us to distinguish the difference between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I don't talk about AI in my book much, really at all, but I do see a way in which human intelligence has really, through the logic of the IQ test, has always been inflected with this sense of competition, right? Of you can boost your IQ, you can have better brain power. It's something that can be improved and is associated with a kind of elite social privilege that comes with all of the privileges our society has given people that score well on this test. So intelligence has been understood as this thing that can be maximized and made more productive. And AI is really putting pressure on that idea of human intelligence, right? Because it's like we will never be able to maximize our productivity and efficiency in the same way as a machine if we want to think about intelligence. But like we don't have to think about intelligence that way. We can think about it and modify it. And the way I talk about it in A Measure of Intelligence is to think about changing to think about ideas of care and of valuing everyone's right to learn and to be curious about the world, and a kind of respect for how that learning and curiosity might look vastly different in a classroom of children, but as a desire to learn about the world is something that can be deeply personal and can also be asserted as a human right. And it doesn't have to be just something that is done so you can get this test score, so you can get into the school in that kind of way. So I think there's ways in which intelligence can be like re-individualized rather than seen something as something that's just this kind of comparative tool to show who's the best in our uber competitive culture that we have.
I really like that, because I was reading a thing the other day where, and of course they're always making these predictions with AI, but they were saying by 2026 it'll be as smart as a Nobel Prize winner. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I don't know either.
Do I care that it has the IQ of a Nobel? Like, to your point, it's not human. It doesn't have feelings.
Yeah.
There's so many other aspects to intelligence than you're as smart as a Nobel Prize winner, whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
Yeah.
And it opens up all of these questions I have that I think about when I catch my college students using AI to write their essays for my classes. It's, wow, you have just wasted an opportunity to think, right? That's what I mean, is like we need to return to getting students to think about the personal value of learning and the personal motivation of it, rather than I need to look like a Nobel Prize winner, so I'm gonna write the essay from this AI and do what I need to do to get this grade. Think of the loss of development and ability to know about yourself and know about the world is what's scary to me.
Hi, folks. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. I want to talk a bit more about newlight.io, the AI FERPA compliant, that's our federal guidelines around privacy of student data, platform making personalized student support a breeze. You know, student privacy is huge in our schools, and New Light is big on privacy as well. It was one of the first questions I asked the co-founder, Jose, about. There are a few AI systems out there that meet the requirements to being FERPA compliant, and New Light does just that. New Light's IntelliTier platform is more than just a data collection tool. It's an AI-powered assistant that has been trained to truly understand the MTSS framework, student context, and school-specific resources. Developed by a team with both social, emotional, and behavioral needs in mind, and with plans to extend into academic support soon. Studies show effective MTSS and SEL implementations can boost attendance, improve grades, and increase graduation rates. Yet many schools struggle with the complexities of gathering data and turning that data into actionable items within the MTSS process. New Light's IntelliTier platform makes it easy with simple, fast data collection, asynchronous collaboration across the MTSS team, and actionable insight that educators can implement and document their success with. Plus, New Light is advised by seasoned educators and administrators, so they understand your everyday classroom challenges. You have to try it out for yourself. So head over to newlight.io to give it a try for free. That's NEULIGHT.io. Thank you to New Light for taking this on, and a proud sponsor of the Shifting Schools community.
I'm thinking about what you mentioned earlier about the messages out there, the number of things that are marketed at us as, you said, boost your IQ. And certainly parents and caretakers today are inundated with, my goodness, just thing after thing that you should do for your child. And the book touches on that too. So I guess I'm wondering, to the extent that society is very judgmental of parenting choices and a so-called parenting intelligence or parenting acumen, how did this book also help you think about what that means, like what it means to be a so-called good parent?
A good parent, exactly. This is something I really struggled with, and I hope that struggle comes out in the book, in the sense that something I had to recognize was the fact that my sense of identity was so caught up in my daughter's own development, right? So as sick and twisted as it sounds to verbalize it, I wanted to work as hard as I could so my daughter could develop as much as she can, even in a way of surprising people of what a kid with Down syndrome could do. And there's also, of course, parents want their kids to learn the most and be as capable as possible. But it also there's also a point where you do have to let go and let your kid be their own person and learn in the way that is true to themselves and not just true to the kind of visible markers of that in test scores. Because I think that's something that parents are really caught up in. There's a way in which I've noticed now that Louisa is in middle school, we have access to online grade books, and so much has been explained to me today about the way in which college students and their parents in my classes as a professor think about education when I'm looking at what my daughter is going through. This is why they think looking at your grade every day is appropriate and a healthy thing to do. And again, like, this is all something that just allows parents, I think, to involve themselves in and their sense of identity in their child's learning in ways that is often pretty unhealthy. And I think I don't exempt myself from that at all. I struggle with that, both wanting Louisa to do very well. I want her to do well in school, while at the same time realizing that school is set up in a way that isn't very conducive to learners like her.
And I think putting that struggle into this book can be really helpful learning for educators. And you talk through how this is a systemic issue, right? To get the IEP, we need the test and the bureaucracy that the team of educators is tied to. And I'm wondering, for anybody who's listening and getting ready to dig into your book, if you have any thoughts on, even if we cannot get rid of the bureaucracy, like hopefully we do one day, but even if you're still operating within that sphere of red tape, what are some things that educators, administrators, counselors either could do more or less of for parents like yourself?
Yeah, I think the importance of the IQ test to categorizations and determinations about a child's education can be minimized. And that's something that I argue not just in school, but the ways in which IQ tests affect services and opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities in our broader society. So there's a way in which that score can be minimized, and we can instead emphasize our actual individual understanding of the person and the way that person learns. And I saw this kind of conflict all the time. And thank goodness Louisa has had some amazing teachers that have been able to step in between her and her IQ score and just be like, wait a second, like, I know Louisa, this is what she needs. This is what the best environment is for her. And we are also in a position where we were very lucky so far where no one has ever concluded that say she should be in a segregated classroom. Like I've never had to fight that with the school district. But I know people that have, and there are some very quick judgments that are made through that IQ score that we need to minimize and look at the human instead.
And I think we're seeing this, we've talked about this here, but the entire system is set up that way. We still class rank kids. To your point of why grades are so important, well, your ranking in your class when you're going to university matters at some level at some universities. And so there's this pressure on the entire system to think in very, I would say, box terms of what intellect is, that it has to, at some point in time, it's a test score, whether that test score be IQ test, SAT test, ACT test. There's something there that we say, this is what tells me that you're smart outside of that. And I think you're right. I think when we broaden this conversation to include artificial intelligence, we're going to have to really think differently about, okay, what does it mean to be human and what are human intellect? Actual components that maybe can't be measured. And maybe we're going to have to be okay. And I know this is hard. We might have to be okay on not being able to measure them, of just knowing, which is hard to say.
It is. Our whole world is based on having some sort of measurable proof that we make decisions based on, right? This is a really big ask, but we could do it. We could just move away a little bit, right? What if we had classrooms that really emphasized collaboration and community, right? If that was the basis, the fundamental logic behind our classes, instead of making sure like that all your kids get good test scores at the end of the year, right? Yeah. Just that little shift, I think other really important things would fall into place in that way.
Educators, are you searching for a new space to connect, collaborate, and grow? Well, Camp Shifting Schools is your new home. With the decline of X, formerly Twitter, we're here to offer a safe, welcoming community where you can join other passionate teachers. Take part in free courses, webinars, and live AMA sessions to evaluate your practice. Ready to join the conversation? Head over to camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the camp community today. Learning and connecting awaits.
We are quite comfortable with not scoring some of the things that matter the most to us, like that last family gathering. We're not sitting around and coming up with a grade,
rubric and saying, how do we do on that? How do we do on that family gathering?
We don't score each other in terms of like how good of a sibling we are, and I think so we do understand that it's possible even for some of the most important things. And I do feel like there's an ungrading movement. There's a lot of experimentation that's happening. And Jeff, as you've mentioned, yes, I do think that AI is really going to nudge us to be thinking about what is the point of school? What is the point of learning together? What should we be doing with our time? And Pepper, you've got so many great anecdotes in the book about moments when Louisa's unique capacity to think differently really shines through. And I feel like that's not necessarily something that we would ever want to score, but I wonder if we are on the cusp of saying, if AI is very predictive, will we be getting to a point where we really want to value stuff that's so unpredictable? I don't know. And I'm wondering, in response to your book, other readers reviewing and commenting, do you feel hopeful?
I do. I do feel hopeful. History gives me a lot of hope in the sense that I thought a lot about like how my daughter's life would be different if she was born 60 years earlier, right? It would be tragically different.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a lot of hope. And also maybe the answer isn't throwing out all measurement entirely, right? But maybe using our humanity to evaluate how we use those measurements a little bit better than we have in the past, right? There's ways in which, say, even with an IQ test, I don't find much meaning in a overall IQ score. But there are ways in which the IQ test is being reassessed and modified and evaluated so that it gives us more kind of granular information that actually can be useful for teachers and psychologists. So it seems like it's a matter of actually human thinking, right? Taking the numbers and the data and using our humanity to think about what those should mean to ourselves and to our world.
Oh, I love that. You just gave our listeners hope as well. In closing, we wanted to ask you, the book comes back to, again, by exploring the history of the IQ test, just how heavily weighted so many things are to the concept of, in air quotes, normal.
Yeah.
You're also an art historian, and we were wondering if that background maybe influenced your thinking with the book. Art is a space where we learn to value and appreciate those new, unexpected perspectives. Where does your art historian identity pop up in the construction of this book?
Yeah, I love this question so much because it really does. You're right. This is not an art history book. I used my research skills for sure and my writing skills to write the book. But you're right. Not only am I an art historian, but I study mostly like early 20th century avant-garde art. So I study all of these artists who are making the weirdest, most challenging kind of art and doing it in a way that really tries to imagine a better world, right? Like abstraction, the kind of crazy white and black squares that everybody is perplexed by when they go to a museum are actually part of ways of thinking about new models for being in the world, models that are based on equality and human rights and human equality. And so, yes, I'm constantly faced with utopian thinkers that said, why not? Why can't the world be different? And I think I did take some of that spirit with me in thinking like, why can't we think about intelligence differently? Why do we think these kinds of systems of defining intelligence are so ingrained and natural to us? Maybe they're not that natural. Maybe we could think about it differently and change it.
Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to sneak in one last thing. Sorry. But I'm wondering, in light of that and this idea of merging human intelligence, what AI's influence is going to be. I don't know if either of you have come across it's called the Nice Aunties art project. It's a Singaporean artist who's operating under a pseudonym who is taking this Asian concept of the auntie, and the artist wanted to see what would it mean for us to really value the aunties in society. And they created this like alternative reality that merges AI art and their art as well. And it is like mind blowing and had me thinking like, what are the
amazing.
It is totally amazing. And it had me thinking like, what are the new possibilities with art? And Pepper, I'm wondering, we always see art push what we think is even possible. And so I'm wondering, maybe as an art historian, you've just seen the possibility that we can completely change the way we do things. So yeah. I guess I feel like maybe that's at the core of this book too. Like we can completely think of the IQ test so much differently than we have.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Yes. I'm going to have to look up the nice aunties now. That sounds amazing.
Oh, I'll email it to you. It's incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Listeners, the book is A Measure of Intelligence. Check it out. Links to it will be over there in the show notes. And of course, we'll continue to follow you in all the other spaces that you're writing as well. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Tricia and Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Hey there, dedicated listener. If you've made it this far, we know you're passionate about shifting the way education works. And Tricia and I appreciate you. If you loved what you heard today, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review Shifting Schools wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings help us reach even more educators just like you. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations, please share this episode with them. Just one person. Think of the impact we can make together. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more great content. And if you haven't already, join us at Camp Shifting Schools, where the conversations keep going long after the podcasts end. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of Shifting Schools.